Well, hello everyone, and we are live. Welcome. It is Thursday, so here we are cooking for today, baking rather, on the Minneapolis Farmers Market Facebook page. And I am Chef Laura Bonicelli of the Bonicelli Cooking Club and the Minneapolis Farmers Market Chef. Tonight we are making a shaved asparagus focaccia with spring green onions, and it is truly a beautiful recipe. Okay, now for the focaccia, a little history on the focaccia. This is a focaccia that I translated from a recipe in a cookbook that I bought in Rome years ago. So my Italian is a little limited, so once I got it kind of translated, then I messed around with it a little bit, but it's been a family staple, and it was a staple in my restaurant, and I've scaled it and taken it down and put on different toppings. And then when I started seeing this kind of trend of shaving asparagus, which I thought was, if nothing else, good entertainment, I thought, okay, let's make a focaccia out of that. So that is where this came from. The dough is absolutely beautiful, and we did make some earlier today. Mark, are you ready to show that? And I'll walk you through it. Okay, here we go. There it is. Okay, so I'm tapping the water. Good, you want that water.
Good. Well, I am.
You want that water to be between, is that going to play?
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Between 110 and 115 degrees, and that's 2 1/4 teaspoons of active dry yeast. So that's one package, 2 1/4 teaspoons. I want to make sure this gets mixed up really well and the temperature of the water is right, because it works every time. It is definitely worth your time to get out your thermometer and check the temperature. And there you can see it has little tiny fine bubbles on top, and that's what we're looking for. Okay, then in my bowl of my stand mixer, that's a tablespoon of sugar and 1/4 cup of canola oil. You could use vegetable oil if you wanted to, and then 2 tablespoons of extra virgin olive oil. We're going to add a little bit of kosher salt here, 1/2 teaspoon of kosher salt, and then 2 3/4 cup of all-purpose flour. In that goes. I proofed my yeast probably 3 minutes. In that goes. And that sugar is going to help this really develop. This dough really raises well. Notice that I have my dough hook on. We're just going to start mixing this up. I've seen a lot of recipes where they have you use the beater and then transfer to a dough hook. I just use a dough hook. It works fine. It just picks up the flour as it goes around. This is at pretty slow speed, and then I just kick it up later. And 6 minutes of kneading, and now I'm putting it back in the bowl. I took it out, put some olive oil in there. It's a little bit sticky. That's fine. Don't let that bother you. Put it back in the bowl. Roll it around in that olive oil. Just like that. Yep. Want it coated so it doesn't dry out, and then we're going to cover it with some plastic wrap. I'm not allowed to say saran wrap anymore. Plastic wrap. And there, it's been rising now for about an hour, and I'm going to punch it down so it can do its second rising. I flipped it over a little bit just to make sure it's still covered in that oil, and cover it back up, and it'll do its second rising. Perfect. And here it is. And it's ready to go. Okay, but before we get to working with this dough, we are going to work on our asparagus. And here is my asparagus. I'm going to set that right there. I'll tell you what, while I'm getting ready for this, why don't you run, I bought this from Russ at Produce Acres. We did a little film clip of him. Why don't you run that right now?
How you doing?
Good, good.
Good. Well, I am making another dish with your asparagus, and this time I'm shaving it.
All right, all right. You're gonna cut it on the bias, or are you going to just a...
Hopefully long strips with a peeler, and then I'm making a focaccia, and I'm going to put it on top of the focaccia and bake it.
Wonderful.
With onions.
What time are you serving that?
I'll call you. You can come on over, okay? Okay, show me the asparagus.
This is what the asparagus looks like. We have some skinny ones and we got some bigger ones, and they're going to be tender all the way to the bottom.
So that's perfect. I'll have to work on my peeling technique.
There you go, and it's going to be very sweet tasting asparagus to start with.
Perfect. I'm going to put them on the focaccia. They won't bake for more than probably 18 minutes, so they should be just perfect then.
Yes, there'll be a little bit of charcoal on them, or caramelized, and awesome.
I'm going to send you a picture, okay? Or maybe I'll just bring it down to the market next week.
That would be awesome. Okay. Awesome. Then I wouldn't even have to come and see you either.
No, I'll bring it to you. Okay, it's about time I started doing that. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you kindly.
And that asparagus is so beautiful, and I have to admit that I wasn't sure what kind of a reaction I was going to get from him when I said I was going to peel it. I thought maybe he would be like, no, don't do that. But I promise you I'm using as much of this asparagus as I possibly can. You do end up with a little bit of waste, but I have a definite technique for that. Now, Russ snaps his asparagus for you. These have been sitting for a couple of days. I got them on Sundays, so they're still totally fresh, but the ends are a little dry, which is fine because I'm not going to use the ends. I'm going to use that bottom to grip it. Now, I have two bowls here, which you can see. These are kind of my longer, more glamorous strips that I was able to get, and then you'll see when I do these few for you that sometimes you end up with pieces that are a little tougher or they snap off, and that's totally good. We're going to use them. We're just going to put them underneath the pretty stuff, so we're using as much of the asparagus as we possibly can. So let's do a few of these. Now what I find, again, I'm gripping it on the bottom, is that it's best to work off of a surface. So this surface is actually two cutting boards, so I can work flat as I'm shaving them and have my hands off the side, so they're flat on the surface. And I'm just using a regular peeler, and you just make sure that you engage really well and you use some pressure, and there you go, and you get a strip. And you're always going to get these little pieces that fly off of this part of it. And sometimes this won't work at all. Sometimes it'll just kind of fall apart, and then it goes in this bowl. So you've got your pretty bowl, which is, you know, I mean, these are shaved and all of that. And then you've got your bowl with the thicker pieces that are, you kind of wind up with it during the end. So the biggest thing is having that edge to work off of is really nice. Let's do 3. I'll do another one here. And then also just using enough pressure. And then sometimes it'll get hooked in your, like, because of the end. So then you can pull it back through like that, which works really nicely. Let's flip this over. Okay. And do another one. And you can see I'm really using some pressure here and there. See, once I get, so another technique that can help is, whoops, it snapped. Let's get rid of that. Okay. I'm going to pull this back here and see if I can get a little more out of that. Yeah, you can see if you can pull the asparagus through when you run into that situation, that helps a little bit too. So instead of running the peeler across it, I'm pulling it through the peeler. Okay, so this guy I'm going to put in there. He's a little thicker, and you can see he doesn't bend. These all bend nicely, which is going to be part of our presentation. It's loose and rustic and really pretty. Let's do another one. Okay, gripping like that. Okay, I find it in the beginning, I always try to go, I run the peeler across, and then I wind up starting to pull the asparagus. Kind of a technique that you have to work on a little bit. Okay, looking good. I'm going to try one more. There we go. And then again, this kind of whooped up there, took care of itself. We'll put that in there. This is 8 ounces of asparagus. I love stopping by Russ's booth at the market, which is right by the office. He always has people hanging out talking to him. He just has a crowd. Okay, one more of these. Okay, now we're not getting any cooperation. Let's try again. Whoop, it broke. Okay, it's going in this bowl. And I'm going to snap off that little bit of end just because it's a little bit dried out, because if I would have done this the day I bought them, I wouldn't have had to do that at all. Could still use that if I wanted to. You know, and as far as what size asparagus works best, you know, within what I got from Russ, there were, you know, thicker ones, nothing really, really thick, but thicker ones and thinner ones, and they all work just fine. So I think a variety is A-okay. I get asked that a lot. You know, are you a thin asparagus person or a thick asparagus person? And my answer is always, I'm an asparagus person. That's it. That's as far as I go with it. I'll take what I can get. Okay, not gonna work. Okay, so let's snap that guy off. And there we have it. Okay, I'm just gonna toss this back here. And then next we have our spring green onions. I picked these up from Shervang, another market vendor at the Minneapolis Farmers Market. I need a knife, don't I? Let me grab one. Okay. And these are wonderful fresh spring green onions. I'll tell you what, I'm going to start slicing these really thin. I'll just take the ends off. Mark, we have a wonderful interview with Shervang. Do you want to run that while I'm working on this?
Sure.
Okay.
Hey, sure, how are you?
Great. How are you doing, Chef?
I'm doing very well. Listen, I am in the market for some rhubarb and some herbs and some spring green onions, but I wanted you to tell me a little bit about your farm.
Okay, my farm's in Baldwin. I live at the farm, 40 acres. We do everything by hand except the plowing, but from the seeding and weeding, it's all done by hand. And there's only 3 of us. It's my parents and me.
Only 3 of you, and you've got all of this produce?
Yes.
What time do you get up in the morning?
So we don't sleep starting from Friday night until like Sunday this evening around 4 when I go home. That's the way to keep it fresh because we don't refrigerate. Yeah, we don't. And then that's how we get things as fresh to market as we can.
You know, I'm standing here and I can smell these herbs. They're just so fresh and so amazing. So no refrigeration helps with that.
Yeah, because like my dad, he's from Laos. They never really have refrigeration except big blocks of ice, Southeast Asia. And their motto is just like how the Italians are. Every morning, go to the market, eat fresh. So that's how it is in Southeast Asia.
I'm looking down here. I have never seen fresh fenugreek at the market. Can you tell me about that?
Take a whiff. It's a really healthy herb.
Oh my gosh.
So
No, I use it. I use the seeds, cracked seeds all the time.
You're missing out. It's
I-
the best is fresh.
Okay, tell me what I do with it.
So it's just an herb. So you take a stalk. They're in the legume family, so they look like alfalfa and clover. So that means that they got really good protein. So you only eat the kill, which is the head. The rest of the stem is too fibery, but you could boil the stem and drink it as a tea. That's what my family we do.
That's
And
fascinating.
so just like dill and cilantro, you could just eat it raw as a garnish in salad. But it's the same flavor as pea tips because they're again in the pea family legume.
Okay, so while we're on the subject of herbs, peppermint?
Yes, because everybody's common mint is different. That's the biggest thing. So I have to say peppermint because some people they grow up with the word mint, and for them there's common mint is spearmint, which is a stronger one. That's why they use spearmint in gum and breath neutralizers more. But peppermint is not that strong, but they have the most fragrance. And a lot of people don't know about peppermint is that it's a hybrid. And the thing with the mint family, there's like over 300, almost 400 types of mint. Yeah, yeah, they're diverse.
I would have said 20,
Yeah.
but that's amazing. Okay, so do you sell these as plants ever, or do you?
Just as a herb, but the biggest thing about peppermint, I tell people, is you could transplant this and it root for you. So I got this breed. This is a Colombian peppermint. So it's the one that everybody talks about for mojitos. Yeah, we're looking at cilantro. This is what I call the strong cilantro because they beat the one at the market. This is like basically Mike Tyson compared to a baby. So with the stems, they're a little bit older but stronger. The fastest way is just to strip them like that. And just like asparagus, where it breaks off, you use it. And now this is the best part. Take a whiff of that, Chef. Throw that in your broth and your stock. So if you're cooking with anything gamey, fish, venison, lamb, rabbit, throw this one in to take it out. This bolting, it's the part where it's saying, hey, I'm getting ready to make seed. I'm gonna focus all my energy to make that seed or flour. That has the best flavor. If the biggest things that you guys never had is if you grow your own arugula, wait until the flowers until it carries the seed. Once you have that arugula grain seed, you'll never go back to like those big like grain. You'll just want like arugula grain.
What about thyme? I have some thyme that's starting to flower and bolt, and that's okay.
Yeah, that's okay. Yeah, they're actually stronger. That's where all the oils are. The biggest thing I tell people is about basil. When bolting basil, they make a stronger pesto.
Okay, I've never heard that before.
Yeah,
I'm doing that. Okay.
Yeah, I actually abstract or press the bolting or flower part of the basil in around beginning in late September to get the oils. That's the best part.
So that's a good information because I think people avoid herbs that.
Yeah, it's just that the fresh markets, supermarket, they made everything so. They forgot everything from the past. They made it so marketable. Everybody's like they forget the idea of how vegetables supposed to be, and they're in the part of how the Tyson chicken or the Cobb chicken is, because everybody forgot about the heritage chicken that takes forever to grow, but has the best flavor that everyone's grandma loved. Same thing with vegetable.
Well, you're talking about what's wrong with our food industry, aren't you?
Yeah, but so come down to the market. You support the local farmers, and the biggest thing is your farmer knows everything about the crop because they're not a rookie guy. They didn't watch YouTube to do it. They spent their whole lives doing it. That's the biggest part. It's a passion.
We're so glad you're here. Thank you.
No problem. I'm always here for questions on veggies anytime.
I'll be back.
Okay, Chef.
You know, my favorite thing about that interview is that he was actually able to talk to me and make change for customers at the same time. But no, that's not really my favorite part. My favorite part was learning about bolting. I mean, for years, I have been told by a lot of people that are experienced growers that you need to, if your plants start to bolt, you've got trouble. So you need to prevent that. You need to pinch them off and use them. Not that it would ever intensify the actual flavor. So that was wonderful. And I loved all of his suggestions of things to do. The fenugreek that I wound up taking home, which if you've never smelled fenugreek, is the most intoxicating smell in an herb, and the seeds are equally amazing. Used a lot in Indian cooking. And I've used the seeds, but I've never actually had the fresh herbs. So I wound up making an after marinade for cauliflower using that, and it was intoxicating. It's just wonderful, and he has fenugreek. Who knew? Okay, so what I did buy from for this recipe from Sure was some spring onions, and I'm just finishing those up. I'm aiming for a 1/4 cup. That's just going to go right on top of our focaccia. So let me just finish these up here. I'm trying to slice them as thin as I possibly can. Okay, and I'm going to say that's good. Perfect. Now let's take a look at our beautiful focaccia dough. Put this right here. What I've done is I've taken a piece of parchment paper and oiled it kind of generously with extra virgin olive oil. And I would tell you that you could just use parchment paper or oil a pan, but you really need to oil the parchment as well, just because this dough is a little bit sticky, and what will happen if you put it directly on the parchment without the oil is that when you pick it up, it'll just leave a fine layer of the focaccia on the parchment paper, which you don't want. Okay, so we're just going to take this. Again, this dough is a little sticky, but it's really, now it's fluffing down, collapsing like that. And I'm just going to use my fingers to spread this out. Got a little bit of piece of asparagus there. Must have been on my hand. All good. All going to the same place at this point. Okay, so this is about 12 inches in diameter, considering that the inside of this pan is about 12 inches, and I'm making it into a nice circle. Kind of punching it down like that. Okay, beautiful. This is going to raise up quite a bit, so just keep that in mind. Now I'm going to take my thicker pieces, the straight ones. There's an end there I want to get rid of, and just arrange those, and then I'll take my shaved pieces that are thinner and put them right on top. And at this point you can do a little arranging. And again, this is about 8 ounces whole, and then I shaved it, so you lose a little bit in the amount. It's going to bake down a bit. And then we're going to just take some of these and twist them a little bit. I like the little curved quality of each of these little shavings. So pretty, and what a gorgeous green. What do you think of that, Mark?
Looks good.
We have one actually that we just baked. It's going to take out of the oven in a second here, so we've been smelling this baking all day long. We are definitely ready to finally eat this. Okay, I'm going to set this aside. At this point, what I would ordinarily do is I would cover this with plastic wrap and let it sit for 30 minutes and let it raise. And what you'd see is this puff up, not significantly, but it starts to kind of envelop some of these asparagus shavings, and that's really, really nice. And it needs that little bit of extra raising, and this dough, it can take it. It will raise 3 times beautifully, but we're gonna kind of speed up our timeline now, and so I'm just gonna set it over here while I work on the olive oil. So I've got here a 1/4 cup of olive oil. And when I first started making this recipe, the directions that I translated loosely, it was chopped garlic, and I have 2 cloves of garlic here. And what I wound up doing, and you'd put it in the olive oil and let it kind of infuse while everything was raising, and then you'd spoon it over the top. But invariably the garlic would burn, which I didn't love, because when it burns, it has an acrid taste to it. So I finally decided the thing to do would be to take a microplane and actually just grate it right into the oil. And this is something I do a lot for sauces, especially if you're doing something like a fresh tomato sauce and you want that garlic flavor, but you don't want pieces of garlic. You want garlic everywhere, kind of in the background doing its work. And a microplane is perfect for that. It does, however, take a little work. But you can see it's just totally fine. You have to be careful not to grate yourself. You might get to a point where you want to just call it. These are big cloves of garlic, but I just like to get all of it, close to all of it as I can. So I'm going to just move it around until I all right, next one. And then you can always just take a little spatula, scrape it off in to the mixture, or what will be the mixture of olive oil and garlic. That's a great smell. And what this is going to do, by the way, it seems like a lot of olive oil, right? I mean, it does. 1/4 cup of olive oil that I'm going to spoon all over the top of this, but it bakes right into the dough, and it makes it so moist and so rich. It's almost creamy. It's just got such a wonderful quality to it. Those Romans, they just knew what they were doing, right?
Most things.
most things. Okay, so they had a couple of hiccups along the way, but it was short. Their street food makes up for everything. That's what I think. Speaking of Italy, I was thinking, that I went on the Minneapolis Farmers Market website today, and just to take a look at the vendors, and there's so many Vangs and Yangs, so many people named Vang and Yang that are vendors there. And I started thinking, I've never asked the question, are they related to each other? And then I was thinking about my family in Italy. On my first trip to Italy, we went to the town where my grandfather is from, the Bonicelli name, and one of my relatives said to me, at least I think this is what he said that there are 5 Bonicelli families, and the town is called Villa Minore. It's in the Alps in northern Italy. And he said they're not related to each other. 5 families named Bonicelli, not related to each other. And this is a village, not a town even. It's a village. So I guess that's a possibility, right? That they could be all those people not actually related. I just need a fork here because what I want to do is mix this up really nicely. Use a little whisk if you have one handy. You don't have to get it so it's completely emulsified, but you want it throughout. So what I'm going to do here to cheat our timeline just slightly, don't let me forget those onions, okay? Let's bring this over here. So I'm going to raise this with the olive oil on it instead of putting it on before I put it in the oven. And then I'm going to remember to put my spring onions that I just so painstakingly chopped or sliced, and then I didn't put them on. I think that looks so pretty. Wait till you see what this looks like when it's actually done. Okay, there we go. And then let's grab a little spoon. I find the best way to do this is to just, now pretend this is all puffed up, is to just keep stirring it and then make sure that you've got a good amount of the garlic with the olive oil and just spoon it over the top. So that's going to help your asparagus cook nicely. And then sometimes these guys get a little unruly and move around, so move them back. No problem. Going like that. I really do want to make an effort to get most of this asparagus in contact with the olive oil because it will help with the browning. Okay, there we go. All right, and then the final step is I'm going to take some coarse sea salt. Oops, that's not it. This is it. Here we go. Coarse sea salt, and this is really quite coarse. So it's going to add a lot of crunch. It will not dissolve, so that's a good thing. And we'll just sprinkle some of that over the top. You don't want to overdo it. You just want people to bite into it and get that little crunch of salt and that little burst of flavor, which is really nice. Okay, now I am going to set this aside because I'm not going to put it in the oven until it actually raises for that 30 minutes, and I have one in the oven. I'll pull it out right now. There we go. So you can see how much this bakes into the dough, which I think is really lovely. And it smells heavenly. This is just such a beautiful recipe. And then I've got here 1/3 of a cup of grated Parmesan cheese. You could use Asiago or whatever suits your fancy. Do this right before you serve it. And it'll just, by the time you get it to the table, it will melt into the focaccia, which will be just totally lovely. Okay, I love it. All right, do we have any questions?
Yeah, I saw your blog post, and you mentioned other toppings for this focaccia. Can you talk about a few?
Sure. So yes, this recipe has been around in my world for a pretty long time, and it's morphed and changed into different things. What I started with was a little less garlic and the same amount of olive oil, and then rosemary, fresh rosemary leaves. And I baked it that way. Always the sea salt. Then I moved into, just because of research and writing different recipes, we put grapes on it and baked grapes into it with also rosemary, and then sometimes cheese. We've used gorgonzola, we've used Delice cheese baked into it. So just bearing in mind that as you do it at that point, like we did with the asparagus, so it raises into the dough, or the dough raises in, the ingredients sink into the dough, and then you bake them. And I'll tell you, if you've never had a roasted grape done that way, fantastic. So that, I kind of have moved all over the place with it. I have never done tomatoes. It's always been a focaccia that I've done different things with. However, I have served it, the rosemary version, with roasted tomatoes on the side. Ricotta is always nice with that. So it just, it's a wonderful base sponge that can go a lot of different directions. So that's what I got for that.
How far ahead can you make this?
Oh, how far ahead can you make it? So you've got some latitude. If you were going to say have a dinner party and you wanted to serve it for dinner, you could make it in the morning. You could make it the day before. But what I do when I do that is I don't put the salt on. And I would say, then you'd refrigerate it because of the asparagus. And then pop it in the oven and do the salt and the cheese right before you serve it. But the salt, because it is so strong, as this focaccia sits, it will literally start to eat into the dough. Just think of like salt on your sidewalk. The damage it does to your sidewalk, it does the same kind of damage over a period of time to your focaccia. So that piece, if you're going to make it ahead, needs to be left off, and then you do that right before you serve it.
And how does this focaccia freeze?
The focaccia itself without the asparagus freezes very well. I probably would not freeze it with the asparagus. I would, if I were making just the base dough, even with herbs and the garlic, to freeze it, I would leave the salt off again, like I just said. I wouldn't freeze it with the asparagus because I think the asparagus would get strange. Probably, something would happen to it. Wouldn't be fresh and lovely like it is right now. So I would leave that off. But if you're going to freeze the dough, we've done that a lot. And the just base focaccia cooked freezes very well, baked.
Right, that's all I have right now.
That's all we got. Okay. Well, I want to thank everyone for watching. Thank you so much, Minneapolis Farmers Market. We love you, and I'm looking forward to this weekend. Remember to go to BonicelliCookingClub.com and sign up for our newsletter. And also, quick plug for the Minneapolis Farmers Market new website. They have a new website, mplsfarmersmarket.com, and they have a newsletter that is fantastic. So sign up for that as well. And we will see you next Wednesday here at 5 p.m. We'll be making Pride Pappardelle. I'll see you then. Mwah!